Hello guys, welcome back to another video. So in previous video we have built the APIs for our point of sale project. So in this video we will be using those API to build the front end UI. So previously we have built the login API for logging, logout and to get the authenticated user data. Then we also created the REST API for our customers for getting the all list of customer, creating the customer, getting a customer detail by its ID, then update the customer and also delete the customer. So we will be using those API to build our customer module. So in this module, we will be building a table and there will be a create button. So in this module, first user will log in by its username and password. Then it will be redirect to this private dashboard, which will be protected by auth middleware. And in here he can see all of its customers. He can also create and edit his customers and also delete his customer. For UI we will be using the most famous UI library for React application, that is Material UI. So currently it is now 5.14 and these libraries have copy paste component which can be copy paste directly to your React component. For form validation and form data handling, we will be using React Hook Form, which is also a famous library. Another is Formic. But in this video, we will be using React Hook Form. And for schema validation, we will be using YAP for schema validation. For the state management, we will be using MobX State Manager. It's a very famous state management library for front-end development. It not only support React, but it also support Angular, Vue, other front-end JS frameworks. In that case, we will be installing MobX, and for React, we will be using MobX React Lite. It is for functional components. Mostly nowadays, we use functional component in our React application. So we need to also install this MobX React Lite to support MobX state management in our functional component. So let's get started. We are in our project folder. So this is the API folder. We built our APIs with Laravel. Then we will be creating our React app in here. For that, open terminal. We will use create React app to create our React application, and we will use TypeScript for it. We will name our front-end application as POS React. It will take some time to create React application. So our React application has been built. You can see here we have a new folder, and inside here we have our React application. So let's open it inside our VS Code. Open terminal and type code dot. You can see here we have our React 18 application. React does not comes with built-in router function, so we need to install React router DOM. So our React router DOM has been installed. It's currently 6.17. Next we will install the UI library, which will be Material UI. So npm install MUI Material, emotion React and emotion style. For the form validation and form handling, we will be using React Hook Form. And for the schema validation, we will be using YAP resolver. So we need to install React Hook Form resolvers and also YAP. Next we will install MobX state management, and for React we need to install also MobX React Lite. You can also install the MobX logger library to debug the MobX state management, like to visualize the actions and observers. So we will be installed as a dev dependency because we do not need in our live production. So all of our required libraries has been installed. Let's start the React app. I am using React Node 16 LTS version. So let's start the React app. npm start. So this is our React app. So in public folder, we have this index.html file, and in here we have this div with a root ID. And if we go to the source folder, in index.txt file, we can see here we are rendering this as you can see here, we are rendering our React application in this div with the ID root. So this is our first component. So let's go to app.tsx. So this is the thing we have actually seen in here. Next, we will be creating some folders to manage our components and middlewares and also state manager. So in source folder, first folder we need to create is config. In here, we will be storing all of our configuration like routing, menu and other stuffs. In here, we will be storing menu. So let's type menu.tsx. Okay. And we can also return it. And in here, we will be exporting our menus. So it will be customer. So for now it will be customer. We will be modifying this later. Next, we need to add a routing file where we will be defining all of our routes. So it will be like, it will be a functional component. So let's name this app route. Then we will have a component folder. So in this component folder, we will be storing those components which will be reused in our application like alert module, pop-up module and also other stuffs. Next, we will be creating a views folder. So in here, we will be storing our views or components. Those are only used in a specific module and which will not be reused in other components. Okay. Next, we will create a store folder. In here, we will be storing all of our state management like MobX stores and also creating the root store. So for views, you can also rename this as pages. So next, we will create some component. There will be two types of component. One is guest and another is private. So create two folders here, GUEST guest and another will be private or authenticated user only. Okay. So in guest folder, we will be creating our login screen. So login screen, so login.tsx, and in private, we will be creating a folder named customers. In here, we will be creating a index.tx. It will be our base layout for our customers. Okay. Create a functional component. So it will be customers. Okay. And in login, it will be also a functional component. So this is for login and this is for customers. Okay. So let's create some routes for this to access these components. So let's create some routes to access this component. We will go to config routes. This is a functional component. So there are two types of routes in React Router DOM. One is static, which is defined statically, and another is dynamic. So in here, we will be using dynamic routes. You can use either of them depending on your application type. Routes, we will be using use route hook. It will be imported from React Router DOM. Inside here, we need to pass a array with route objects. Okay. So let's name it routes and we will define it here. So const routes is equal to a array. Then we will define the route objects. So it consists of path. Then we need to define the element which will be a JSX element. So in our case, it will be the JSX component. So let's try this tst save. Okay. Now we need to, so we have imported it here. Now we need to return this route. Okay. So route. Now we need to define this route component in our root component. So in that case, we have this index.tx. We can also define it in here, but we will be define it in app.tsx. Okay. So let's define it in here. We name this component app routes. Okay. It is imported above. And we also need to wrap this component with browser route. And it will be imported from React Router DOM. So import. Okay. Okay. So let's go to our application page. So as you can see here, we have a root directory and the name is test. Okay. So let's visit another URL and you can see here it does not have any kind of thing in here. So in here we will create another routes. Let's name it login, and the element will be login, and there will be another route named customer, and in here it will be customers. Okay, so that is the main element. And in root we can also redirect it to this login component by default. So in element we need to say navigate to, and in here we will define the route. Okay, so login, so it will be respected to its parent element. So in that case it will be /login. Okay, so it will be imported from React router DOM. If we go to root, we can see here it is redirect to our login component. We can also visit our customer component, but later we will be protected this component with auth middleware. Okay, so let's designing the login component for that. So go to MUI official documentation, and we will be using a card element for that. So let's copy this basic card element and we will paste it in here. Okay, we need to also import all of this, so let's import all missing imports. Okay, and we will not using this text. We do not also need this action. Okay, so in here we need two input fields. Okay, so for that we will be using material UI text field. So this is the text field, and we will be using this. So this is the text field. There are three types of text field. We will be using this field. So let's copy this and paste it in here. Okay, so let's go to front end. Here are two fields, so let's modify it. We will add this pull width. We can also set the type of the field. Okay, so we have added some style and also add a heading, and there are two text field with a submit button. Okay, so this will be our login component. So in MUI, if you want to style a component, you can use this SXPop to add some CSS style. We will be add some margin top, let's say 3. Okay, so now it's looking fine. So next we will implement React hook form to handle this form and submit the data. First we need to add the schema. So the schema will be a object. So first we need to add the schema, that is the structure of the form. So it will be an object. So this object will have two properties like email and password, and email will be string, it will be a required field, and type will be email. And in password field it will be a string required, and it will have a mean length of 4. So in this function you can also set your custom messages. We need to also we need to also import yup in above. After that we will use form hook from React hook form. From that we will extract handle submit function, register, controller, and from the from state we also extract errors and is submitting. Okay, so let's import that above, use form, and in here we will be using resolver, which will be a yup resolver, which we need to import above, and it will accept the schema. So we need to feed the schema, and we need to also set the default state of our form, and password also be empty. Okay, now we need to wrap this input fields with a form tag, and in here we need to also set the on submit function. So it will be handle submit, which is coming from use hook form, and there will be on submit function. So we need to create this function. We will grab the form data, which will be any for now, and in here we will be printing those data. React hook form will do is it will grab this input field and then run this handle submit function. So this handle submit function will be using this EAP resolver and use this schema to validate the data. So if the data is validated, then it will return the data as a JSON object, normal JSON object. And if there is anything, it will be storing all the errors inside this errors object. Okay. So to use MUI with React hook form, we need to also wrap these MUI elements with controller component, which will be coming from React hook form. So let's do that. So we have wrapped our component with controller component, and in controller we need to define the name, which we have defined inside our schema. So it will be email. Next we need to bind this controller to our controller form, which will be coming from use form. And in the render function, it will be a callback function. So in here we will be passing this field data, and inside here we will render our text field MUI element. We can also access the errors data. So in here we will check if there is any kind of errors related to email. So it will return true or false. And if there is any kind of errors regarding to this email, we will print those messages. Okay. And we need to also bind the field. Okay. So this will bind it here. And we need to also import it from React hook form. Okay. We will do the same for the second field. It will be password, and it will be labeled. So it will be labeled as password. Okay. So let's check that. Okay, React hook form has no exported number. Okay, resolver. It will not actually coming from React hook form. So it will be coming from hook form resolver EAP. Okay. So let's try that. Email, login, and you can see here we have our error messages. Okay. So let's type it. So it's an invalid email, and if we type @something, the errors will be gone. And for the password is the same. And if we go to console, so you can see here it is actually return the form data as an object. Now we will be calling the login API to get the authentication token. Okay. We can also use this is submitting, which is a boolean. So during submission of the form, we cannot also click this submit button. So we can also disable that. So disable. So let's check that. So disabled will be our in submitting state. Okay. So let's create our MobX store, and in there we will be defining our login function and call the login API. So let's go to store, and inside store, so in here we will have our auth store. So let's type that auth store.tsx, and it will be a class. So let's type it class. So there will be two properties, which is authenticated, that is the state of our user, and also the access token. Okay. In the constructor, we need to make this property as observable, so we can access it from our functional component, and whenever this property value will be changed, our component will be re-render. So let's import make observable from that, and so we have two property and we have defined it as observable. Okay. So we need also two setter methods to set this observable. So we have created two methods to set is authenticated state, which will be accepting a boolean value, and in here we will be set our authenticated value. Okay. So in set token, which will be accepting a value which will be a string or null. If the value present, so we will be storing our token to our local storage, and if the value is null, then we will be removing it from the local storage, and after that we will be setting our token value. So whenever we are setting this authenticated value to false, we need to also clear the token so that our auth store can be resetted. So to recognize this method as a action by our MobX store, we need to also explicitly define it as action. Next, we will be creating a function to call the login API. So let's create a function. So the function will be asynchronous function. It will be accepting the JSON data. So you can also create an interface or type of the data separately. Next, we will be using try catch block to handle any kind of error asynchronously. So before that, we need to also define our base URL. So it will be our React app API URL, then /auth. Okay, so this will be our base URL. We need to also define our React app API URL in our .env file. So for that, we need to create a .env file in our root directory. So .env React app API URL. So it will be http okay. So let's restart our application. Now we will use this base URL inside our login API. So for that, we will be using fetch, and then we will be calling this login API. Method will be post, and the headers will be content type application JSON. So we can also define some headers. So it will be application JSON. So in body, we will pass our data as a JSON stringify. Next, we will convert this response as a JSON, and if the response error is true, then we will return a promise reject and send the data. Otherwise, we will be setting this authentication to true and store the authentication to our set token method, and then we will be returning a promise resolved data. And if there is any kind of error or exception, we will console this. Okay, now we will be using this method inside our functional component. So rather than using this auth store directly into our login component, we will be creating a root context, and inside there we will be creating this auth store instance and using that context inside all of our component. So before that, we need to export our class, and we will be creating a root store. Okay, so let's create root store .tsx. So we will be exporting a class named root store, and in constructor we will be creating the auth store object. Okay, so let's define it, which will be type of auth store. So we can create a interface for our root store also, and we can implement this here. What is the benefit of this is that we can now pass this root store instance inside our auth store and access this root store from the auth store. So what is the benefit of this structure is that from the auth store, now we can access all the functions and other store methods inside our root store. So let's go to auth store, and in here in the constructor we will be grabbing root store. Okay, create a root store in here. Okay, now we can implement it here. Now we can access all the functions and other stores from this root store. So let's create an example. So in our login function, whenever there will be an error, we need to create a handle error function so that we can reuse it in every component and every other stores. So, and it will be reused in other stores and other functions as well. Okay, so in the root store we will be defining a function. So in the root store we will be defining a function named handle error. It will have a error code, then which will be a number or null. Then we have the error message and the error data. Okay, and in here we will be console log the error data, and if the error is 403, that is the unauthenticated error, we will set our auth store to false. Okay, so this .auth store set authenticated is false. We can access this auth store because we have created inside our constructor. So now we need to define it in our interface, which will be a function. Inside here we can now access the handle error function. So this dot root store, and in handle error we will pass the error code. So we can pass any kind of custom code in here and say that something is wrong, and we can also use this error data inside our if else object. And if there is any kind of error regarding to the API response, we can also handle it here. So we will pass the response status, the message, and also the total data. So that's how you can actually access all the functions inside our root store from auth store. So now we will create root store context, okay, by using the create context method, and in here we will instantiate the root store. So let's import it, and now we will create a hook to access this store. So use store, use context, and then we will pass the root context. So we are getting a argument type context. So in that case, so in here we are actually importing the create context from VM. It will be React. Okay, now everything is fine. So now we can use this use store hook to grab this root store instance. So go to login component, and inside component we will define const root store, and from root store we will be also extracting only auth store, and it will be coming from use store. We have imported it from the root store, and we are grabbing the root store and extracting the auth store. So now what we can do is we can also call the auth store login method in here. We need to define it as async. Then first we need to also define the try catch block, and if there is any kind of error we will console this, and in try we will use the auth store login function, and in login function we will pass the data. So we can also pass the data directly, or we can pass the data as a JSON object also. So data.email, we will use await to get the data. So if the login is successful, our auth store will set the authenticate to true, and we will set the access token. Whenever this happen, we need to redirect to our private component, that is the customer component. Okay, so whenever our authenticated status will be changed, our component need to redirect to our customer component. So in login method we need to define if the user is login, then redirect to customer component, that is the private component. So in here we are actually getting the is authenticated observable from auth store, then check the observable. If it is true, then we will navigate to customer, otherwise we will be continue to this login component. So we need to also navigate, so we need to also import navigate from React router. So we have setted our login component. So let's test this. So React hook form is called conditionally. Okay, so we need to define the use form hook at the top level because we are returning it in here. So let's define it in the top level. Okay, let's check it. Okay, it's working fine. Let's try to log in. So it's password, copy, let's log in. Let's check the header, localhost. So localhost 8000 auth login. So we have a mistake in here, it will be API/login. So let's go to environment/API, we need to add. Let's restart our React app because we have changed in our environmental file. So we have logged in successfully. So this was our payload. We have the access token, and if we check the local storage, and we have also stored the access token in our local storage. So in here, as you can see here, we are also redirecting to our customers. So this is the customers. So our application is working fine. So if we try to go to login page, we can also actually visit this login page. So this is not working because we need to also make this component as an observer. So in here we need to just wrap it inside observer, which will be coming from MobX React Lite. Okay, so paste it, and we also do the same in our customer component. So it will be also a observer. Okay, so whenever we are actually using MobX, we need to wrap every functional component with observer, so that if anything has been changed, all the components should be reloaded. Next, we need to also check the token if in the local storage. So whenever we are actually visiting this app, if the token is exist in our local storage, we need to also grab this token and set the authenticated to true. Okay, so let's do that. So in our auth store, so whenever we are actually refreshing the page, we need to get the token from the local storage, and if it is exist, then we need to set the authenticated to true. Okay, so let's try that again. Refresh. So as you can see here, it is automatically redirect to our customer. Okay, so let's try to go to login. Okay, so as you can see here, we cannot go to this login component because we are authenticated. So next we will be preparing this private component with MUI. So we will have a base layout, and in there we will have this customer component. So next we will be designing our private component, and it will have a base layout. So in this base layout, we will have a top navbar, which will be consist of some menus. We will have a title and also a logout button, and in there we will have this middle component where we will render all of our modules like customer module and product module and orders module. And in here we will have some our reusable component like a alert component and also a pop-up component. We will also designing this create and edit form to create and update data. So let's start. So first we need to go to material UI, and from the app bar we can actually use this as a base layout. So it has a responsive navbar. Okay, so click show code, and we will be copy this whole code, which will be in TypeScript, and create our base layout. Because our base layout will be reusable to multiple components, we will be putting it inside our components folder. So in here we will be creating a folder layouts, and in here we will be creating a base layout .tsx. Paste the whole code in here. We do not need to use this typography, and in here we will be rendering our component. And if we go to top, then in here we have our navbar. So it is the drawer, and this drawer have a drawer component. So in this app bar we have our nav items, that is our menus. So it is like rendering, so it is rendering like buttons. Okay, so this is the drawer element where we also rendering our nav items. And in here we have a function to set the mobile state. So if it is true, then it will be opened, and otherwise it will be false. So in here we have our nav items, but if you remember, we already created a nav menu in our configuration file. So let's open there. We will create an object. So first will be label will be customer, and so URL will be our route URL. So let's try this customer. So customers, it will be plural. So let name these customers, and we will have like multiple menus in here like products, and it will be products. Now we need to just import this menu. So let's just name these nav items. Okay, let's go to base layout, and we will be deleting this. and rather than we will be importing from config menu. And in for loop, in key we will have item dot label, and in list text item we will also have item dot label. We need to do the same for our app bar. We need to do same for the other menus also, dot label. Okay, so let's check it. Okay, so we have some. So to use material icon, we need to also install the material icon. Okay, so if you go to installation, in the bottom you need to just run this command to install material icon. Let's install this. So we have installed. Okay, let's run npm start again. So we have our customer component. So to use this base layout, what we need to do is we will be using this whole code as a base layout, and in here we will render our modules. So we need to define outlet, which will be actually imported from react router DOM. Okay, so let's go to route config routes. So we will be creating child routes. So we need to so we will have a dashboard route. So all of our route will have dashboard prefix, and in element we need to print. In element we need to render the base layout, because we need to rename this as a base layout. Okay, so base layout. So let's copy this and paste it in here. And so we need to define all of our routes under children. So children, it will be an array, and in array we need to define our child routes. So first route will be customers. So we have the base layout, it will be loaded for all of our children's routes. So in here we have the base layout, which will be loaded for all of our children's routes. Okay, and this extra component, that is the customer component, will be render in here. So let's try this. And in menu we need to also define it as dashboard slash customer and dashboard slash products. We need to go to dashboard. Okay, so in dashboard, as you can see here, we have the base layout loaded. And then if we go to customer, then our customer module will be loaded. Okay, so let's click on customer. So let's click on customer and products. Okay, so this is buttons. We need to change it to router links. So we need to change the list items to list item button. We will define the key as item level and make this component as a link. So we can change the material UI component by defining the component type. This link will be imported from react router DOM, not from MUI. And now we can pass the to the item URL. And in list item text, we can now render the menu name. So we will do same for the top bar also. So we just make the button to a link component, and we have passed the to, and we have used the to prof to set the item URL, and this URL is coming from this. Okay, so let's try it, refresh it. So it's dashboard product, and if we go to customer, it is actually appending dashboard twice. Okay, so in here we need to define the full path. So slash dashboard slash customer slash dashboard slash products. Okay, so let's do that. And if we refresh it, customer, then products, so slash products, and we have the customer also. Then we will have our logout button. Okay, so let's also add that. So in base layout we will have our logout button, and this will have a on click logout function. So we will be define this function, and in here also we need to define the logout list item. Let's create this logout function, save it. So we will be creating this logout function in our auth store. So go to auth store. We have already created a login function. Let's create the logout function. it will be a asynchronous arrow function which will accept nothing. Okay, and in here we will wrap this function with try catch, so that if any exception occur we can catch that. And in here we will be handling this error. Okay, so this root store dot handle error. Okay, and in here we will pass our custom code 41419, then message something goes wrong and the error. And in here we need to also call the logout API and pass the BRR token. So in that case we will be creating a fetch request which will be type post and the URL will be logout. And in header we will pass the token which is already setted inside our auth store. Next we will convert this response as a JSON. So in that case, if there is any error, we will be calling the handle error function and pass the response status and data message and the response message and along with the error data. Then we will be returning a promise reject with the response data. Otherwise we will be set the authenticated status to false and return the data with the promise resolved data. So then we need to access this logout function. So go to base layout, and in here we need to extract the logout function from auth store. So const root store, we will be grabbing auth store from use store hook. Next we will create a function logout function which will be a async arrow function, and in here we will fire this logout function. Okay, so first we need to wrap this function in a catch block. So if there is any error we will be console logging this error, and in here we will be calling the logout function. So res data await dot logout. So let's try that and let's see if we log out properly or not. And before that we need to also wrap this base layout with observer. Otherwise if any variable change their state inside our MobX store, the component will not be notified and the component will not be re-render. So let's do that. So we need to change this as a arrow function. So let's cut it, const base layout. So this will be const, so we will be defining it as a arrow function. Okay, and we also need to export it in here, and we need to also wrap this inside observer, and this observer will be imported from MobX store. So we have also inserted observer from MobX React Lite. So let's save this and check this, refresh it. We have in our customer. So in products, because there is no route defined, that's why it is showing blank. So if there is any kind of undefined routes or the routes we do not define, it will be automatically redirect to our base component. So in that case is dashboard, otherwise login. So we will be configuring that also. So let's configure that. In here we need to say this, that if we try to go to any undefined routes, it will be navigating to root. So in that case it will be navigating to login. If we have logged in, so it will be redirecting us to dashboard. Okay, so let's see that. Okay, so it is actually redirecting to customer because we did not actually modify the login function. We actually define the customer. So in that case we need to define dashboard / customers. Okay, so let's check that, refresh. As you can see here, if we go to let's say product page, it is automatically redirecting us to customer. Okay, so let's try different thing. So it is redirecting us to customer. Okay, so you can also render a 404 not found page. So let's click on logout and let's see if we are logged out and redirected to login screen. Okay, go to network. So yes, we have successfully logged out, but there is no state change. So let's see. Okay, so to see if the MobX state change is occurred or not, we can also use the MobX debugger. So there is no state change. So to debug MobX store, we already installed MobX debugger. So let's use that. So to use MobX debugger, we need to go to root store, and in here we need to enable MobX debugging. So in that case, process.env. So we are checking if the node environment is development or not. So then we are requiring MobX logger and enable logging. So we can also do that by our local environment variable. So it is like development. So let's try to use that. It is coming from React. So in that case, it is coming from React, and we can also use our local environment variable, this. So now as you can see here, we have a redirect to login. Let's log in with our username and password. So now you can see here all of our actions are observers. So here is the set token method, here is the set authenticated method, and also the set token method. Okay, and the argument it is passing. So it is very good for local development. It should not be used in your production environment. So as you can see here, our actions has been fired, but there is no re-render. This happened because we did not define the logout function as a action inside our make observable function. So we need to define it in here. So we have defined the login and logout. So in login, previously it is working because in login function we are actually observing this is authenticated observable. So that's why the component actually reload, because of this is authenticated observable. Otherwise it will not work. Okay, so let's define it, login logout action. So we can actually define it here. So if it is not login, we should not be view this or load this component, but we need to actually rewrite this same code inside all of our components. So in that case, we will create a middleware or a functional component where we will check if the user is authenticated or not. So for that, we will create a middleware. In source directory, we will create a folder named middleware. So middleware is nothing, just a functional component. So let's name this private layout, private route dot tsx. It will be a functional component, and in here we will check only if the user is authenticated or not. So in here we will check only. So in here we will check only if the user is authenticated or not. Okay. So we will accept the accessible element in here. We also need to define the type also, react dot, it's a functional component, and in here we need to pass the element which will be a JSX element. So now we will use the store and access the auth store and access the is authenticated observer. So let's import it, and in here we will be checking is authenticated is true or not, and if it is not true, then we will be redirecting to login page. Okay, and this navigated will be imported from router DOM. So we need to also pass this private route inside observer function, which will be imported from MobX React Lite. So rather than returning the HTML component, so rather than returning the HTML code, we will be returning the element, so which will be passing via props. So that is the simple middleware. Now we will use this middleware. So let's copy it, and inside config routes. So in here now in here we need to wrap this component with private component. Okay, so in that case it will be private route which will be imported. So we need to pass here base layout. We will be doing the same thing for our submodules. So it will be customer. The private route will be loaded, and it will check if it is authenticated or not. If it is not authenticated, then it will be redirecting. Otherwise it will be returning the passing element. Okay, so let's try that. Refresh it, login, and if we try to log in, then it will be redirecting to login. Okay, so our private route is working. Next, what we need to do is, if we go to dashboard, first it is showing this blank page. What we need to do is, if we go to dashboard, we need to redirect it to customers module, so that whenever we try to reach this dashboard, customer will be loaded by default. So go to routes, and in here set the index route, so it will be blank, navigate to customers. Okay, so now if we go to dashboard, it will be redirecting to customers. Okay, so let's change the title, so it will be pose, and in here also. So next we will be adding a table in here and list all of our customers. So go to component, we will be using the same card element. So first go to pages, private customer index. So this is the customer. So in here we will be defining some styles. So we will be using box element from MUI. In the bottom we will be rendering our sub components. So in this customer section we have this customer heading common for all of the sub modules for the list and also the create and edit form. We have this alert module which will be common for all of this module. So what we can do is we will create a customer base layout, and inside here so we will be rendering the sub modules like list and this form. Okay, so let's do that. Next we need to create the sub components for our customer module. So first will be list dot tsx. It will be also a functional component, so it will be list. Next we have our create form component, create component. So we have this list, create and edit. Okay, so in edit we need to also define it as a functional component. Now we will render this inside our base layout in here. Okay, so go to config, routes, like we have defined it previously. We need to define its child route here also. So in here we need to define the children's. So children path will be the index page where we will be rendering the list element. So it will be list element. So it is imported from customer list. We can name this customer list. Okay, we need to also define it in our list, so it will be customer list. Okay, for the edit and create we need to also define it as customer create, so it does not have any kind of conflict. And sorry, it will be edit, and in create. So now if we go to our, we can import it in here, customer list, then we will have customer create, and next will be customer edit. For customer create we will be using create. So in edit we will be passing the customer ID as a param. Okay, so now we have did it. Let's go to our application. So our customer list has been rendered by default. So let's go to create. So customer create, and if we go to edit, it will be edit. Okay, so that's how our routing is happening. So first we will be building this list component. So for that we will be using MUI data grid. Go to MUIX, and in data grid, so in here you can see here we have these beautiful tables. So it has sorting function, we have select, and also some filter. It is all actually client side, and we have also our pagination. So let's copy this code and see how it is, and let's see. So let's copy this code and see how it is working. So copy it here, and if we go to list we will be pasting all, and in rendering function we need to define it as a customer list. Okay, so in here we have this box and this data grid. So this data grid has rows, and this data grid has also columns, and we can define the initial state. Okay, so MUI Dex data grid. So we need to also install MUI X data grid to use this data grid. So let's go to So let's go to installation MUI X. We will be using data grid. So instruction, just copy it and install it. Start the application. So as you can see here, we have our data grid. It is completely free and open source. You can also buy the premium version which has some extra features. So we will be using this simple table. We have rows, columns, initial state and page size option. Okay, so let's see it how it is looking. Okay, so it's looking great. So these rows and columns, it will be stored inside our customer store so that we can actually modify this row table. So this is the actual data that we are actually visualization in here. So we will be modifying this inside store. So first we need to go to store. We will create a new store, customer store.tsx, and in here we will be copy auth store and paste it in here. So in here our base URL will be customers. So in here we will be defining two data, that is row data and columns. Okay, so we need to also import this. Next we need to also define the columns. So in our columns we have first name, last name, email, phone and also zip code. Okay, and we need to also show the ID. You can also hide this. Okay, but in here we will be showing this. So let's define it. So we have defined the columns. So first parameter field. So in field we need to provide the object key, then the header name, that is the title, and width of the column. Now we will create a function to fetch the data from the database and set this row data dynamically. Okay, get a setter function for this observable. So we will define a setter function to modify this observable. Next we will define the try catch block and use the handle error function to handle errors. Then we will fetch the list from the database. Then we will fetch the customer list. It will be a get request. We need to also pass the BRR token. Then we will convert the response in JSON. And if everything is alright, then we will set the row data with the incoming customer data list. Otherwise we will handle the error and reject the promise. So let's rename this customer store. Now we need to create an instance in our root store so that we can access it from root store. So go to root store. In here we will be creating customer store and name will be customer store. We need to add it inside our interface. So we need to also implement it in here. This is the customer store, and in constructor we need to create an object of the customer store. So let's do that. And this is the customer store. Okay, and because we are passing this root store instance as a dependency inside customer store, we can actually grab this root store instance and make it a property inside our class and use it, and we can access all the stored data from this root store. Like we have accessed the token, root store, auth store, then token. Okay, so now we need to call this fetch list inside our customer list component. So go to fetch. So go to page private list, and in here we need to import the use store. So it will be root store. We need to grab the customer store from. Now we can use all the functions inside this customer store. We need to also define this fetch list as an action. So in here fetch list, it will be action, and also this set row data. Okay, so let's format this. So let's go to customer list component, and in here we will create a function which will be init table. It will be a asynchronous function, and inside here we need to define also the try catch block. So inside try we need to call the customer store fetch list function. So await customer store dot fetch list. Okay, so what it will do is it will fetch the customer list API and grab the data, and if everything is goes right, then it will set the raw data. Now we need to access this raw data inside our list component, and in here we will be doing customer store raw data, and we need also the columns. Okay, so we do not need this right now. So now we need to call this init table when our customer is loaded. So we will use effect hook. So we have imported in top. Now we can use it. Use effect hook. We have a callback function. So we have a callback function, and the second parameter will be empty array. So we want it to run it only once, not every time. So copy this and paste it in here. Okay, so let's check it if everything is working or not. Go to our React application. Now let's log in. We need to also fix this password to be password. So go to login screen, make this text field as type password. Okay, so type password. So it is now fixed. Let's log in. As you can see here, it is actually disabled during login, but we have some problem in here. So it's saying exception message, API customers list not found. It could not be found, exception code. Okay, so in here we need to update it v1. Okay, let's log in. Okay, so as you can see here, it is working. There is no data, so let's try to put some data. So in login, so let's logged in, and we'll use this access token to create our fake data. Save it, and in store, let's fire this. So we are entering last name, first name, email and phone number to this v1 customers. Method will be post. Send it. So we have created a customer. Refresh it. Okay, so let's check our network. Okay, so we have our data, but it is not set in here. So let's see what is happening. In list, we need to also wrap this functional component inside observer. Okay, so let's do that, and we need to export customer list, and this observer will be imported from MobX React Lite. Okay, so let's save this, and we need to also do for the rest of the component. So in index, we have wrapped this. Edit, we need to do the same. Observer. Okay, save. Do the same. Okay, so now it is working. So as you can see here, our state was changed, but the component was not reloaded, so that's why there is no data. But now we have our data. Okay, so let's style this component and center these elements, and we will also have a add customer or create customer button in here. Okay, so let's do that. So in here we are using container component of MUI to center our application. So we have set the max width to large screen, and we are using the box component, and inside here we are rendering our sub modules. So next we will have our actions button in here or in here, so that we can do edit and delete functionality. So let's add that. So let's go to customer store, and in column definition we will add our actions button. So we have our actions button, field will be actions, and header name will be actions. We do not want to sortable or filterable, and in render cell we can render our JSX element. So in here you are using list button component. We need to import that. we need to also import delete icon. So we have imported our icons, and this is our edit and delete icon. Let's see. So we have here our edit and delete link. So in edit link, if we click here, we can go to our edits dash the customer ID, that is 2. So in here it is 2. We just convert this list item button to a component link. Then we are using toProp to generate a dynamic edit URL. So in that case, we can get this row object by using the params API. So in render cell callback function, we are passing the params. So inside this params.row.id, we can actually get the object ID. That's mean this ID. Okay. We will implement also this delete functionality later. So in create, we have also create a button, convert this button to a link and use create route. So let's go to customer create component and create our form. So first we will be creating our validation schema. So it will be an object with first name, last name, email, phone number and zip code. And we have defined some validation like string, required, minimum and maximum number of the character to handle submit, and also EF resolver to validate the form data with the validation schema. So in here we have also defined some default route. In here we have also some default values. Next we will be building our customer create form. So let's build that. So let's create that form. So I have already built the form. So in here we used box component to wrap this component inside a box. Then we will wrap our input fields with form HTML element. This handle submit function actually grabbing the form data and validate with EF resolver with the validation schema. It will be passing the validated data on this on submit function. So let's create that. Next we are using material UI grid to places our input field like so as we know, every grid has 12 columns and we are using 6 columns for each field. So it will be taking 50% of the space. Next we are using text field and wrapping this text field with the controller component, which is coming from React hook form. This is the name. We are binding the controller with it and showing errors if there is any errors respected to this key. So we have done this, all of this component, name, email, phone number and also zip code. At the end we have two buttons. First is save, which will be type submit, and another will be a normal button. And in normal button we will have a on click function to navigate back to our list component. So to use this navigate, we need to import use navigator. So we need to import use navigator hook. So we need to import use navigator hook. So we need to import use navigator hook, const navigator. Okay, so we have imported the use navigated hook and it will be imported from React router DOM. So this is the view. As you can see here, we have the customer, then we have the create, and this is the form. And if we try to submit it, we have these validation messages. Okay, so it is working perfectly. So let's try to grab this data and create customer. So for that we need to go to customer store, and in here to create a customer we will be creating a function to create a customer. So it will be a asynchronous function and it will be accepting the push data, that is the form data. And in try catch block we are handling errors. Then we are using this fetch to call our base URL. So next we are using fetch, type will be post and our URL will be the base URL. We are passing the authorization token in here. Content type will be application JSON and body is the form data. Next if the API call is successful, we will return the promise resolve with the respected data. Otherwise we will handle the error and reject the error. So in that case, when we are rejecting the error will be occurring inside our catch block. So we can also do some kind of form validation. So let's define this as a action. this will be a action. So this is the create data. Next we need to use this create method inside our customer controller. So we have used the use store context and extract the customer store. We can also extract the create data function from the customer store. Next we will use this create data to create the customer. So we are using this create function and pass the form data, and if everything is alright, then we will be resetting this form and navigate to back. We will be iterating to every keys of that error object, and we will use set error method to manually set the error with the respected field. Okay, so in here you can see here we have the errors inside this data object, and we have the key for each field, and inside this array we have the error message. So we are iterating every keys and grabbing the keys name, then set the error manually with the error message. So error.data, then the field key. So let's try this, refresh it. So let's save this data. Okay, so we have successfully entered this data and the data is available inside our list. Okay, so the response status is 200. Let's try to create the same data. So I will be using the same name, and if we save this, there will be a 400 error. Please enter the valid input data. The email has already been taken. So we have the data object, and inside here for each key we have this error message. So in the field we are setting the error for each field with the respective error message. So that's how you can set the error manually inside your form component. So let's go back to it. We need to also delete this debugger. Okay, so let's delete this. Next we will be working on this edit field. It will be the same form, but we need to populate our user data, but we need to also populate the user data in it. For that case we will be using this show method API and update API to get the old data and update with the new data. So let's just copy and paste this component to this edit component. So let's rename this edit component. Okay, now we need to go to customer store and create two methods. So let's go to customer store, and in here we will be creating two methods. First will be get data. So in here we will be passing the customer ID and call the view customer API. So the API method will be get. We will be adding the authorization token, and if everything is right, then we will be resolve this data. Otherwise we will be rejecting this data and handle the error. Next we need another function to update this data. So this function will accept the customer ID and the post data. We will be calling the update API. For that the method will be put. We will be also passing the authorization token and the latest form data, and if everything is all right, then we will be resolving this data. Otherwise reject this data. So we need to also define these two methods as a action inside our make observable function. Next we can actually grab these two methods inside our edit class. Next we can grab these two methods inside our edit component. So go to edit component. And in here we will use these two function. So we will be using use effect hook to pre-populated the form, and in the dependency array we will be passing the ID, so that will be passed through URL. So to grab the ID parameter that is passed through the URL, we will use param hooks, which will be coming from React Router DOM. So inside here we will be calling a function which will be init form. So let's create that form const. So in here we will be defining our try catch block, and next we will be checking if the ID exists, then we will be calling this get data function to get the latest data. After that, we will be using this data to pre-populate our form with the reset method. This reset method is coming from use form hook. So let's check that. This will be edit form. So we have this error update. So on submit function, we have this update data, and in here we need to pass the ID and alongside our post data. So TypeScript actually showing error in this ID. So first we need to check if the ID is existed or not. So for that, we will be checking if the ID existed or not. If the ID existed, then we will be calling this function. So let's check that if it is working or not. Okay, so this is our email. Save this. So it is working perfectly. Next, we will be using the unique test case. Save it. So as you can see here, the email has already been taken. So our validation is working fine. Our server side validation is also working fine. Let's save this. Okay, so we need to join D2. Let's save this. And as you can see here, our email also updated in here. So next we will be doing the delete functionality. So in that case, we will have a pop-up like that, where if we agree this, the delete API will be called and the data will be deleted. So for that, we need to use a dialog component, and it will be a generic component which will be used for every modules in delete component. So because it will be a generic component, we will be storing this inside this component folder. So we will be create a folder named dialog, and inside there we will be creating a component app dialog.tsx. This will be a functional component. So this is our dialog component. So in here we have a state, so for opening and closing of dialog, and this is the to function. And inside dialog we have this title, this text, and there are two buttons, that is handle click open and handle close. Now we need to create this function inside a store. Now we will be creating a separate store for this dialog component, and we will be defining this function inside that store so that we can access it from any other component. So let's create a store for that. So inside this dialog store, so in this store we will create a observable is dialog open, which will be false. So this will control the dialog open and close functionality. There will be a dialog text which will be dynamic. By default it will be are you sure. Then we need to also define this is dialog open as observable, and we will be creating 3 methods for this, and we need to also define these methods as a action inside our make observable. So in open dialog we will be passing some data. So in this data there will be two things. First is the confirm function that will be dynamically sent from the parent element, and there will be a dialog text, and it will set the is dialog open state to true so that the dialog will be opened. Next we have this closed dialog function. So in there we will be resetting our confirm function, which we have defined it here, so that the confirm function is reset every time the dialog is closed, and also regenerate every time the dialog has been opened. So next we have this confirm action. Whenever we click on the confirm button of the dialog, it will fire this confirm function, which we have set up during open dialog dynamically. So this is the confirm function. So now we will access these 3 functions inside our dialog component. We need to also set up this confirm action function inside our make observable as a action. And it will be a arrow function. Now we will access this methods and property from our dialog component. So first we need to instantiate it in our root store. So let's do that. So it will be dialog store and it will be dialog store. Now we need to also define it inside our root store class, and in here we will create an object. So it will be dialog store. Okay. Now we can actually extract it from the root store context. So go to dialog component, and in here we can extract the dialog store. Now we will extract the observable and actions. So first is, now we will extract the three method. Now we will extract the observable and actions. Next we will be grabbing the observable and actions from this dialog store. So now we do not need to use this component level state. We can directly use the store. So it will be is dialog open, on close, it will be close dialog. In confirm action we can also use it in here, and for close dialog we can also use this in here. Okay, and also in here. Okay, so on click close dialog. Okay, so we have the confirm action button and also the is dialog open state. Now we can actually access this component via open dialog function. So from any component, whenever we will fire this open dialog and pass the dependency data, we can actually control this dialog component. So let's see that. So we will be go to this customer store, and we will be creating a function to delete the customer. So in delete data we will pass the customer ID. It will be asynchronous function, and then we will call the delete API. Method will be delete, and if everything goes fine, then we will be resolving this data with the response data. Next we will be creating another function to control this dialog. So we will be creating a function named delete dialog, which will be a asynchronous function, and it will be accepting some params, and in here we can access the dialog store. So this root store dot dialog store dot confirm action dot open dialog, and in here we need to pass the object, and in this object we will be passing a confirm function, which will be a callback function which will actually fire the delete data, and in this delete data we will be passing the customer ID and the dialog text. Are you sure you want to delete this item? So let's copy this function, and we will be putting this function inside this delete button. So in here we are actually calling this delete dialog function and passing the params where we can get the customer ID. So let's test that. Click on delete. We have one row selected, but there is no pop-up. Okay, so go to dialog store. We need to wrap this component with observer, so that whenever this is dialog value change, it will re-render. So let's try again. So open dialog has been called, but there is actually but we did not see the pop-up. Okay, so if we click this delete button, as you can see here, open dialog function is called, but there is no dialog because we did not add this component in our base layout. So just copy this app dialog and go to component layout, base layout, and in here just paste it. Just import it. Because it is added in our base layout, the component will be available for all modules. Let's try this. Refresh. Okay, let's click on delete. Yes, are you sure? Okay, so if we click confirm, you can see here the data has been gone. If we refresh the page, so we can see here the data is finally deleted. Rather than calling the list API again, we are just grabbing this raw data. So we are just filtering this array where the ID is not equal to the current ID, so that our table is also updated. It is much more efficient rather than calling the list API. So now our customer module is ready. So let's add some data in here. So let's save it. Okay, so we have entry a new data. We can also edit this data, save it. So, and we can also delete this data. Okay, confirm. Yes. So our customer module is ready. Next we will be adding two extra modules. So this is the first part of the large project, that is point of sale. We will be adding extra two modules in there. Second will be product module. This will be the same module where admin can create, update and see all of its products. Third module will be orders module where admin can create invoices for the customer with multiple products. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it, and if you want to see more of these videos, do subscribe to this channel.